Well, where you at, New Orleans? And welcome to Dattitude, episode number 115, the live version for a Friday, November the 11th, 2022. I am here along with Jeff Duncan, as we are every Friday. We had to go a little bit later than usual. We had some stuff going on this morning. We appreciate you waiting and joining us, as we do every Friday morning. Dunk, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, man. Beautiful day. Great weekend ahead. I'm excited.
Yeah, you're excited about the Saints Steelers, though. That's the question.
I don't know about that, although it is kind of two franchises that we're used to seeing a lot of success from that both are struggling. So it is normally this would be a high-profile game, and it feels like it's totally being overlooked on the NFL schedule.
For sure. It's a little weird, actually, the fact that it isn't. As we are every Sunday, every Friday, we are taking your live comments and questions. Feel free to chime in on the YouTube and Facebook pages. And if you're on Twitter and you're watching us live on Twitter, you can hit me up at Jim Derry Jr. and I will post any comment or question that we see here. Let's see. I'm not sure what that one means. I'll show it. Bookie Brown, we signed Cam Newton. I don't think the Saints really want to go that route. I think the Saints are in a weird enough situation as it is. Cam Newton, I don't think, is on the horizon. I think he's certainly on the downside of his career. There's a reason why he's been a free agent for all of this year. But Dunk, I'll let you comment on that.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, Bookie. Sorry, but I don't think Dennis Allen would survive the locker room coup if he brought in Cam Newton right now. It would not be good.
Yeah, it's been such a weird year. It feels like just the season's slipping away, and yet the Saints are only a game back, and the Falcons lose last night to Carolina in just a weird game in the rain, and the Saints yet, if Tampa Bay loses to the Seahawks, which is entirely possible, Tampa Bay is a 3-point favorite, I think. The Saints are favored this week. The Saints could theoretically be in a tie for first place, but it just doesn't feel like that.
No, they'd be 4-6 and tied for first. That's the testament to how bad the NFC South is. And to me, it's masked some of the real issues in the organization because, and with this team, because everyone's still thinking, oh, wow, the Saints have a shot. And it's true. But I think anybody that looks at this objectively, JD, if you're a smart fan, which we have a lot of smart Saints fans out there. I mean, Saints have a very intelligent fan base, and they know that there's not a lot of hope for the future. That's really the problem. And along with that, we've seen when the Saints kind of step up in class like they did on Monday night, they're really not competitive. Right. So even if they somehow, finagle their way into the playoffs, and it could happen like the Seahawks did in 2010. I know they won that game. Seattle did with the Beast Mode game. It just doesn't hearken much hope for the Saints prospects, even if they get in the playoffs, because these elite teams just feel like they're on another level right now.
We're going to get to matchups in a minute, but I will say this. As far as the Saints go, look, I predicted the Saints to lose last week for a reason. The only reason why I wasn't a little bit stronger on it and wasn't more emphatic is because the Sharps all had the Saints Monday night. And so it kind of got me to back off a little bit of what I was thinking, and I wish I wouldn't have, because when it comes down to it, to me, the Saints just don't fare well against good running defenses because it puts all the pressure on the quarterback in that spot. And look, I'm not gonna go on and on and on. I've been saying it for weeks. I think anyone who's watched the show more than once or twice or listened more than once or twice knows how I feel about Andy Dalton, and I think it's the wrong choice to have him in there. I said a couple of weeks ago, it's the kind of decision that gets you fired. But that being said, when they play a team where Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill can get loose a little bit, it takes a lot of pressure off of Andy Dalton. And the Steelers, frankly, are just an average against the run, and they're terrible against the pass. So I think that this is actually a week where Andy Dalton can do a little bit better. We're going to get into that in a moment. Mark Satanovich says Taysom Hill is 8-2 as an NFL starting quarterback, yet everyone says he ain't a QB. And Winston and Dalton are right now question mark. I know, Mark, from your past comments, you really don't like Jameis Winston, and I get it. And so now it's funny. Here's one of the things, too, that bothers me. all the people who were rah-ing for Andy Dalton are now saying neither one of them are any good. But my point is, we don't know what we're going to get with Jameis because we haven't seen him enough.
Yeah, I think the quarterback call right now to me is almost irrelevant because I don't think the guy is there regardless of who they go with. I think what we saw Monday night was when it's kind of what you said, Jim, when the running game isn't there to protect Dalton, when the offensive line isn't perfect, you really see his limitations. He really is unable to make plays on his own, off schedule. And Sean Payton used to always say this. We live in an imperfect world in the NFL. Things aren't always going to be perfect. They weren't perfect for Lamar Jackson. How many times did the Saints have pressure on him, get into the backfield, and couldn't get to him, and he'd get out, either run or make a play or get rid of the ball? We saw Drew Brees do that for years. Sometimes he wouldn't necessarily complete a pass. He'd just get rid of the ball and avoid the negative play. Andy Dalton can't do that. So unless the running game is there, unless the pass protection is pretty flawless, it's pretty bleak for the Saints to move the ball.
Monday was a double whammy. Not just, like I said, if the Saints are playing an elite rushing defense, which is what the Ravens are, especially now they got Roquan Smith. That's what they are. They're an elite rushing defense, and they're almost an elite defense, period. As bad as they were in the beginning of the season, I think they're getting to the point where they're an elite defense. So it was a double whammy in the fact that it was a terrible matchup, our offense against their defense, and then it was a bad matchup on the other end because the Saints don't fare well against running quarterbacks. So it's hard to take a lot out of, and I know that the Sharps are all over the Steelers now, but they hold grudges. Sharps hold grudges. They lose big against the team. The next week they want to bet against them just because people are taking too much on what happened the week before. It was the same last week. The reason why a lot of people were high on the Saints because of what they did to the Raiders. It's about matchups, and this is a much better matchup. And I know T.J. Watt may come back this week. If he does, great. But I don't think anyone can expect them to be 100%, and that is not going to change the fact that the Steelers aren't very good defensively. They just aren't. They aren't good in the defensive backfield. They aren't good along the line except for T.J. Watt. Their linebackers are just average, and so it's just this is a more favorable matchup, and we'll get to our predictions later on. But we keep talking about quarterback, and I don't know that I agree with the fact that we don't know. I mean, Barry says the Saints 2023 quarterback is not currently on the 2022 roster. Here's why I disagree with that. Jameis Winston's cap figure next year is $14.5 million. The Saints don't have money. They're going to be forced. They're going to be stuck with Jameis Winston, or they're going to have to draft someone. And where they're going to draft, I don't know. I mean, they could draft in the top 10 possibly and maybe get a quarterback that they could use, but I disagree with that. I think they're stuck with Jameis Winston, I
don't agree. No, I think they'll move on from those guys.
They're just going to cut them and eat that money.
Yeah. I mean, they have an out this year. They have an out. I mean, they actually will pay more if he's on the roster than if he's off. So
I thought his dead cap space was pretty high, if I remember correctly. It's not $14 million.
He's got a $12.5 million base salary, I think, next year. They're not going to pay that.
I think
it's on the bench.
I wish I called this up. I had it up last week. I get where you're coming from, but I believe his dead cap money was somewhere along the lines of $10 million.
Yeah, and I think they'll eat it, and I think they'll move on. So, and I think if there's anybody that they keep, it might be Dalton because he's cheap, but there's a reason he's been on his fourth team in 4 years. So I kind of agree that they might go in the quarterback market in the offseason with a backup plan to keep one of these guys. I'm not saying it's impossible to keep Jameis, but JD, if they were going with Jameis next year, they'd have him in the lineup this year. I don't know why it's going to change.
Because I think it's DA that's making this DA and Pete Carmichael. And I got to be honest, I don't think either one of those guys is going to be around. I certainly don't think Pete Carmichael's will be around next year. They might keep. I know Mickey's loyal to a fault, so DA has a chance. But if they lose this game on Sunday, they're probably going to go 4 or 5 win. It's going to be a 4 or 5 win season. And Barry, to your point, I can't be serious. Then you haven't paid attention to what I'm dead serious. I don't know how many times to say the same thing over again. It's like banging your head against a wall. And if you want to keep watching Andy Dalton, where 1 week he's okay, the next week he stinks. 1 week he's okay, the next week he's worse. You keep watching that. We know what we have with Andy Dalton. It's a 6-win team with Andy Dalton. Jameis Winston, it might be a 6-win team. It might be an 8-win team. It might be. You don't know. No one knows. He played the first couple weeks injured. No one knows what we have is my entire point. You keep talking about records, and Taysom Hill was 8-2. Well, Jameis Winston went 5-2 as a starter last year. You don't know what you have. And it bothers me that people are stubborn to a fault. If you want to go 6-11, sure, keep him in there. But that's what's going to happen. They're going to go 6-11 with Andy Dalton in there. And I don't know how else to say it.
Well, and I think any past records, whether you're talking about Taysom or Jameis or whoever, are skewed because
I agree.
They're irrelevant because Sean Payton was the head coach then. And
agree wholeheartedly.
So that to me, you throw it out the window what he was, because clearly Sean Payton is a Hall of Fame coach, and right now Dennis Allen is kind of still learning on the job. And and this is the other thing I would say about this week's game, and I know we'll get into some more in-depth talk about it, but the Saints are really banged up. I mean, really banged up. I don't know if I'm as optimistic as you are, because if they continue to have these problems on the offensive line, which it looks like they are, with McCoy being out. I mean, these are major issues for them up front. And I don't know if they're going to have any more luck moving the ball, even against a bad Steelers defense, if TJ Watt comes back. And I don't know. I'm not as optimistic.
We'll get to our predictions later on, and you're more than welcome to chime in with your predictions as well. And you're more than welcome to tell me I'm wrong. I'm going to get to something in just a minute. Lindsay wants to know who has thrown the most interceptions, and I assume she means this year. The answer is they're equal. They've both thrown 5 interceptions, and at least 3 of Jameis's interceptions came in a time when it was kind of panic mode and he was forcing things to make things happen. Barry, here's another comment. We let Winston play to prove he's terrible. How do you know? How do you know he's terrible? He's terrible because you want to think he's terrible. You hate this. This is what you hate. You hate eat the dub. It bothers me. There's a bias out there. There's no doubt there's a bias. I'm not going to go into it. If you're not smart enough to figure out what the bias is, then you probably shouldn't be watching this show. Because, you talk about smart Saints fans. It's bothering me. It is truly bothering me. The same people who don't like Jameis Winston are all of the same ilk. And now it's like they both stink. So they both stink. That's fine. You can't use Taysom Hill as a quarterback at this point because you've already decided he's a tight end. But let's not be stubborn about it. And I think, to be honest, Dennis Allen's being stubborn. Andy Dalton is not going to be the quarterback of this team next year. Maybe Jameis Winston is not. But we don't know, is my point.
Well, my point about Jameis Winston that I mentioned a few weeks ago when I wrote my column, I think played out in that game against Baltimore, where you could see the limitations in Dalton. I mean, it wasn't just and I know people will say, well, he wasn't getting protection and he wasn't getting a lot of help. Well, that's the thing. You don't a lot of times, and you have to be able to overcome that. And he really has no ability to do that. Everything has to be on schedule and perfect for him. He's really incapable. And you see also, JD, the way the Saints coach with him. I mean, they're very cautious. Everything is conservative. They're almost playing not to lose.
I agree.
And you can't win that way against a team like Baltimore. And the one thing that Jameis gives you is a puncher's chance at a big play. There was no chance the Saints were going to make a big play against the Ravens. I know they got one late on a fluke play to Juwan Johnson, but at least Jameis Winston gives you that spark. I mean, 100%. He can maybe make a play. There was no hope with Andy Dalton. That's my point about Jameis Winston. He gives you a puncher's chance. You don't have it with Dalton.
No, and look, Andy Dalton at one time, he was I don't want to say much. He was a better than average quarterback for much of his career.
Correct.
But he is now 35 years old. It's not, people think of Tom Brady where you play till you're 30, you're 45. That's a freak of nature. Even Drew Brees. I mean, we saw the arm strength go down, and at 41, he couldn't throw the ball like he used to. So really, Drew Brees, until he was 39, also a freak of nature. Well, look at what's happening with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I know the Packers have their issues, but I think he's 36 or 37.
He's dropping off.
He's dropping. It's clear. Quarterbacks, when they get even the elite quarterbacks start dropping off when they get to look at Russell Wilson. I mean, it's just a fact of nature. And Andy Dalton, I think he's done. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he retires after this season. He's going to be a free agent. He can sign on somewhere, but I don't know.
I think it's clear right now the Saints are trying to make a living with two guys that probably are backup quarterbacks at this stage of their careers. And that's just, they're still good enough against bad teams because the Saints have enough talent around them to where they can beat a Raiders team and beat a Falcons and a Panthers. But when they step up in class as they did Monday night, it gets exposed.
Agreed.
That discrepancy between the Baltimore Ravens and the Saints was glaring. And that's why, and I've talked to our colleague Fletcher Mackel a lot about this because I was kind of on the Kenny Pickett train last year. I know the Saints like Kenny Pickett. And you could make an argument that they would have taken Kenny Pickett with the 20th pick, not Trevor Penning, that you feel a lot better about the future because he's cheap. I mean, I'll say cheap. Any rookie quarterback is cheap. You've got salary cap issues going forward. At least if you're going to lose, you lose with a rookie taking your lumps with hope for the future. Right now, I don't see any hope at all. If they were going to make the moves they made to go get 2 first-round draft picks, I think you could make an argument they could have used one on a quarterback considering where they're at salary cap-wise and lack of assets-wise. They chose instead to go and try and win now. I think, one, they overestimated the talent on the roster, and 2, they didn't foresee all these injuries, which they couldn't have. But that's where we're at right now, and it's pretty grim.
I couldn't agree more. I think Kenny Pickett is the next coming of Justin Herbert.
He's going to be good.
I think he's going to be one of those kinds of quarterbacks. I think, and I agree, the Saints missed out. I don't understand as much as they needed a left tackle. Don't get me wrong. I think Trevor Penning's going to be in this league for a long time if he can stay healthy.
Me too.
But they needed a quarterback more than they needed that. And you knew you weren't tied to Jameis Winston. You signed him to a 2-year deal, but that doesn't mean you're tied to him. It would have been the perfect opportunity to bring in Kenny Pickett. He would have fit this team perfectly, and you missed your opportunity. So, I mean, you may have another shot this year, but the top-notch guys, I mean, Bryce Young's going to go in the top 1, 2, or 3. I mean, I think we know that. I mean, so – who else are we looking at? I just it's one of those seasons where it's just a weird year, and we don't know where the Saints are going to draft yet. Going back to
Kenny Pickett beats the Saints on Sunday and has a good game, man, JD.
I mean, yeah, it's going to hurt even more than that. Go back to Jim's comment. Fire Loomis. Mickey Loomis isn't getting fired. He may retire, and which is going to happen before too long. I mean, I don't think Mickey Loomis wants to stick around all that much longer. I think, Dunk, you might agree.
Right.
I don't. He's more.
Nobody's firing Mickey Loomis. Nobody's.
No, but I mean,
Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen isn't getting fired.
No, but what I'm saying is Mickey may retire before too long.
Well, yeah, he may move into another role, kind of advisory role, and let Jeff Ireland be the general manager or something.
Right.
Like that could happen, but that's not going to be on his terms. Only on his terms.
I agree.
No
100%.
pressure from Gail Benson loves Mickey Loomis. Loves him.
And I don't endorse. Let's get this straight right here, in case anyone from the Saints is watching. I'm not just saying this because if the Saints are watching, I'll say whatever I think. I've been doing it for this entire year. Mickey Loomis is a fantastic general manager, and by no means, look what the Saints team has been dealt. You signed Michael Thomas that long-term contract. I was never for signing a receiver or really almost anybody, unless it's a franchise quarterback like Drew Brees, to that long of a 5-year contract for $100 million, and it kills you if something happens. Well, something happens, and now it's kind of, I think that's the elephant in the room. That's the thing that's really hurting this team, is they're so strapped because of Mike Thomas. I'm not going to that whole debate today. I don't feel like it. But you're stuck with that, and now next year we don't know how bad Marshawn Lattimore's hurt. And next year, you're talking about a $60 million salary cap hit between those two guys. So I agree to some point you talked about you don't think quarterback is the main issue of this team. And that's right to a point. But if the defense didn't have to be on the field so damn much, I think that they'd be playing a lot better. I heard I was like yelling at my radio coming back home from the game Monday night. Bobby Hebert's talking about how terrible the defense played. I mean, was he watching the game? They were on the field for 2/3 of the game. 38 minutes of the game they're on the field. How can you can't chase around Lamar Jackson for 38 minutes and look good.
Well, you got to make a play on third down to get off the field yourself, and they couldn't do it. So I understand it was a little both. I mean, there were a couple of third downs, Jim, where clearly the Saints couldn't get lined up. They were miscommunications. There were guys wide open. And that was something that the Ravens did to them. I mean, if you listen to the broadcast, Troy Aikman said that Greg Roman said during the week he felt like with some late movement and motion that he could confuse the Saints defense. That's something they saw on film, and it worked to a T because there were guys not lined up. At one point, Pete Werner hesitated just a half split second, and it left a guy wide open in the flat. He couldn't get over. And those things matter. It converts a third down. You're back on the field with Lamar Jackson, a guy's like capable of going the distance on any play. You got to get off the field. So it was a combination of things. And the defense, largely in the front seven, has been pretty healthy. And they didn't come and they couldn't get him on the ground. I know he's an incredible player, but at some point you got to get the guy on the ground, and they couldn't do it. So it was a combination of factors. And I think your point about Marshawn Lattimore, though, it is becoming an issue because when he's not on the field, it creates a domino effect. And all of a sudden you got Alante Taylor and Paulson Adebo playing it against guys that they're probably not quite ready to go against, and the Ravens took advantage of it.
There's no question. And this is the last comment I'm going to take on the quarterback situation because I'm moving on. I mean, I hate to be so fired up about it, but I think there's just, the word ignorance isn't right because I don't want to piss people off. But there is a bias back there. There are people that will not see the forest through the trees and don't understand what the reasoning I've been trying to tell you is. It's not about Jameis Winston versus Andy Dalton. If they are exactly equal, okay, if they're the same, they're going to give you the same going forward. It makes zero sense to start Andy Dalton because of what I've told you. You can say whatever you want. I've seen Jameis. You haven't seen Jameis Winston enough with this team. You're thinking about the 30 interception season with Tampa Bay. A lot of things have changed since then. He had LASIK surgery. He led this team to 5 victories. Again, that was with Sean Payton. Understand that. But we don't know, period. You can say you know that Dalton's better or it doesn't matter who's better. It does matter. It does matter. And this is the last comment I'm going to take on this. Winston is the more athletic of the two. However, he does not protect the ball. How do you know? You haven't seen it enough. They've both thrown 5 interceptions. Dalton will have to do. No, Dalton doesn't have to do. And Joe is a good friend of mine, by the way, and I appreciate the comment. I just simply don't agree with you. But we're going to move on, Dunk, because I want to talk about something else, and I want to talk about the matchup itself. And this week, what we have, and we look, and the Saints are a 1.5-point favorite. Again, this opened up at 2.5. And I find it interesting that people are the sharps again. They're a fickle bunch. I know they're not supposed to go off of what they saw last week, but I know you think the Steelers. We're gonna get to our predictions again at the end of the show. So I think if you watch the entire show, you know where Dunk's going, you know where I'm going. But the line's about where it's supposed to be. If anything else, I think the Saints should be a little bit more favored.
I just think
whether you agree on whether the Saints are going to win or not, I think the Saints, if you look at the numbers, they should be more favored.
Well, they do play well on the road, and it's going to be cold. I mean, cold by our standards. It's going to be like in the 30s, low 40s. I would think that would favor Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh's got a lot of issues themselves, and I think that's where hope should reign for the Saints. I mean, they're talking about replacing Najee Harris. He was their rookie, all pro. I mean, a Pro Bowler last year's rookie. And now they're talking about him getting benched for Jaylen Warren. They've got issues. You mentioned the offensive line. They have a terrible offensive line. I don't know how they thought they were going to go into this season with that line and survive with a rookie quarterback. They're not giving Kenny Pickett any help. They've traded away Claypool to the Bears.
That's the story.
Yeah, they're basically – I understand what they're doing organizationally. I have great respect for the Steelers. I mean, we have a New Orleanian running the show there now, Omar Khan. Went to Tulane as a local kid from Rummel. And look, they're going to end up being good. But they are taking it on the chin this year. And so I think there's hope that they've got more issues than the Saints do right now. But when I saw the injury report yesterday, man, it gave me a lot of pause to a lot of key guys on that report.
There's no doubt about it. And I think, but if you're a Steelers fan, you probably, ticked off about Najee Harris. But I mean, how is he going to run? I mean, we saw how Alvin Kamara couldn't run last week with his O-line playing crappy. So, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you're as good as your offensive line is, no matter what you're doing. And so the Steelers just haven't been playing well offensively. And we look at the matchups, and this is why I think the Saints are better off this week. This is a completely different kind of team they're playing. They're second worst in passing defense, which is why I think Andy Dalton is going to have. Now, granted, they've been playing most of the season without TJ Watt, and so quarterbacks have been roaming free, and they've been able to throw all over this defense because their secondary isn't very good. And when you don't have TJ Watt, you can't get a pass rush. I heard a stat the other day. I think in the 2 games that Watt played, the Steelers had something along the lines of 9 sacks, and since he's been gone, they only have 7 total. So obviously, it's a big difference. But you look at the Saints' rushing offense, 12th in the league. That's going down from last week. The Steelers are average. They're average at running defense. And on the other side of the ball, the Saints defensively match up well against the Steelers. Frankly, anybody matches well against the Steelers, defense against offense, because they're terrible. So it's a completely different game this week. You cannot judge, just like you couldn't judge the Raiders game going into Ravens and you felt all great as a Saints fan. Here's the chance. And I wanted to believe that. I still took the Ravens. It made more sense logically to me. This is a great matchup for the Saints. You talk about the weather, and if they can get to Pickett and somebody locks down George Pickens, who I think is going to be an elite NFL receiver, they don't have a lot else.
Yeah, I'm just worried about who's going to lock him down.
That's true.
Alontae Taylor took some bumps the other night. I mean, he wasn't going against any elite players. That was my point about my column about the difference in the 2 teams was really a quarterback. I mean, I would argue as banged up as the Saints were, Baltimore was in way worse shape offensively. I mean, they were missing their 2 best running backs, their top receiver, and their all-pro tight end, Mark Andrews.
They had number 8.
Who scared you?
Number 8.
Yeah. Who scared you?
Number 8. I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
You can't stop them.
They won because they have a great quarterback. We saw Drew Brees do that over and over again during his career. I remember the game where he threw touchdown passes to 4 undrafted free agents. It's not about the Jimmies and Joes and the receiver and running back room when you've got an elite quarterback. You can get by when you got one like that. That's why I think it gets overrated sometimes when people talk about not having Mike Thomas. I don't think Mike Thomas would solve their issues right now.
Well, I agree with that.
If they were playing Baltimore and they had Mike Thomas, they still would have gotten skunked.
I agree.
The limitations at quarterback. So they had Chris Olave out there. He played okay. But you see when you have a limited quarterback, it's easy to take a guy like that away. And there's just not much else for the Saints to hope on right now when they get their running game shut down.
I know each game is different and each matchup is different, but I don't understand Pete Carmichael basically. First of all, he's abandoned the run way too quickly. Second of all, Taysom Hill was like a ghost. I mean, some games he touches the ball 12, 15 times. In other games, he's a ghost. And he was a ghost on Monday night. There was no game plan to use him whatsoever. And I get that they're a good running defense, but you got to find a way to use them. At least try it. And they didn't even try it. Yeah,
the Saints, I was not, and I think Pete Carmichael would be the first guy to say he didn't call a very good game. I'm not sure it would have mattered, but it wasn't very creative. And the lack of Taysom Hill opportunities surprised me. I know they had a few plays where they got behind the chains, and that kind of takes him out of the game early, and then they got down. So this team is not built to come from behind. They're just not. So they really aren't. They have to be in this game early, and once they fell behind by halftime, it was pretty bleak, and they were having to do some things they probably didn't want to do. But there's a lot, as Dennis Allen said the other night, there's a lot of dirty hands in the offensive lack of production, and I think Pete Carmichael's part of it, sure.
Well, you say they're not built to come from behind. What's the one game they did come from behind? Atlanta. Who was playing quarterback? Just saying. Right. Just saying. But this, what is the bigger problem here is, we kind of touched on in the beginning, but with no cap space, how is this team going to get better in the near future. Let's just say, I don't think look, this is clearly a must win, and I don't know how many times you can say must win in the same season, but this is a must win. They lose this game, go to 3-7. I don't care what anybody else does. They're done. They're not going to come back with the schedule that they have. As it is, I'm not sure that even winning this game and winning next week is going to be good enough because, again, the schedule they have coming up at San Francisco, at Philadelphia, at Cleveland with Deshaun Watson is no easy feat. So besides all that, looking ahead to next year, I mean, they don't have any cap room to bring in a free agent quarterback. They don't have I don't know who they're going to be able to bring in.
Well, you just never know in the NFL, though. That's the thing. Things change rapidly in this league. I mean, no one at this time thought Sean Payton wouldn't be back in New Orleans, and Russell Wilson leaving. Things happen in this league. It's a crazy league. I think that's the hope, and you've got to have a plan to execute it. I mean, the Saints went whole hog for Deshaun Watson last year, and I think we now see why they did that. I mean, they needed to try and find a franchise quarterback in the post-Drew Brees era.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Like condoning the move, I just understand football-wise why they did it, because right now we're seeing it play out in front of our eyes. They don't have a quarterback, and I don't know. You just don't find those guys. They're hard to get.
They really are.
That's why I think you could have made a really strong argument about going with Pickett in the draft, and that crescendo is going to keep growing as the season plays out, I fear.
I thought that when going into the draft. But, I mean, look, they make the decisions. And, I used to say in Peyton we trust and in Loomis we trust. And it's true. So, I mean, you have to – not every decision they make is going to be a good one. And some drafts they have outstanding, unbelievable drafts. And other drafts are just, And that's kind of, I think, what this ended up being. Except I think Olave is obviously a clear top 5 potential kind of receiver. And Trevor Penning, we don't know what he's going to be. I mean, but I think he could be a stalwart at left tackle for a while, again, if he stays healthy. And we may see him before too long as he is eligible to return anytime within the next 21 days. We're going to find out real soon. But it can be tough to watch, and you can understand that, but just don't put too much on the week before.
No, that's a great point. People do that too often. They don't take into account the opponent, and that's the most important thing in this league, how you match up. The Ravens are a team that the Saints have traditionally struggled against.
Right.
I think they're now
6-2. 2-6. Yeah,
2-6 all time against them, and one of those wins was a Justin Tucker missed extra point. So they've struggled against them historically. I still think this Pittsburgh team is vulnerable, but I think the Saints are also vulnerable. So I can see why this game's almost a pick 'em. And the fact that the Steelers are coming off a bye week, probably had a lot of preparation. The Saints are on a short week. I mean, there's just a lot of factors that I think indicate why maybe Vegas sharps are going with the Steelers.
But I will say this, and it's been noted that there's success. When you have a terrible week, as the Saints had, it's almost good to have a short week because you don't have time to sit and lament and think about what you did wrong and feel sorry for yourself. You just got to go back to work. And that's what the Saints did. And meanwhile, the Steelers had to sit and think about getting their ass kicked by Philadelphia the last time they got on the field. And they lost to Miami the week before that. They're 2-6. So I think it's the opposite. So I don't know that the bye week, actually, that was not a good – you don't want to go into your bye week limping. And really, Philadelphia kind of eased up on the Steelers. That could have been – I mean, I don't know if you've watched any of that game at all, but that could have been 49-13. I mean,
I would say that, but the Saints roster is banged up, man. So they need every day they can get, and that's my main issue with the short week. Is I don't know. I mean, there were a bunch of guys that didn't practice yesterday. That's the key day of practice.
Pete Werner. I mean, he's going to be missing Lattimore, missing
Eric McCoy. I mean, there's a reason that they brought in, Kenny Young, the former local kid linebacker. Yeah. You're going to have to have another linebacker now. I mean, they're banged up, man. I don't know if they're going to get Marshawn Lattimore back. Maybe Jarvis Landry finally gets back. He was kind of close last week. Maybe he gets back and helps out a little bit, but they're just missing some key players right now at some key positions, and there's not a lot there. This is why I guess when you get down to the Saints' elite players, they don't have very many of them, and that's because a lot of them are on the sidelines.
All right, we're going to get back to the Saints in just a moment. We're going to wrap up the show with our Saints-Steelers predictions. We got about, 12 to 15 minutes remaining here on the show. Let's see, I got one more comment. Move McCoy to right guard. You're not going to move him anywhere right now because he's hurt, and I would not move McCoy to right guard. That means you want to put Ruiz at center, and I think McCoy is – I think that's – I get it was Ruiz's natural position as well in college, but I think McCoy is better off at center, but who knows?
Ruiz has had a solid
He's
year.
had a better – he's only had maybe one or two bad. There was one game in particular. I can't remember which game it was, but I remember saying how bad he was. But other than that, I think he has been better this year. He's definitely been better.
The guy that's been disappointing, well, Pete has not played as well, and he's very inconsistent.
Ramchek's been banged up off and on.
Yeah, Ramchek's had a little bit of a down year, but I think overall graded well. But you're just trying to survive with James Hurst and Calvin Throckmorton when he comes in there. I mean,
James Hurst has not been good.
They're not talented enough up front. There's a big drop off is the best way to put it. When you start losing guys like Trevor Penning and Anders Pete and Eric McCoy, the talent level, you're talking about first-round draft picks, second-round draft picks down to undrafted guys.
And James Hurst is meant to be a fill-in left tackle. He can play anywhere on the line. He's not supposed to be your starting left tackle for the season. So, I mean, you're more than halfway into the season now. He's been playing. It's not his fault. I mean, that's not really – he's supposed to be able to just do, what he can do. I mean, and he is. He's doing what he can do. But, I mean, he's probably more suited to be on the right side of the line anyway.
Well, I mean, basically, he's like the Andy Dalton of left tackles. He's probably best suited to be a backup, and you're trying to survive at one of the most important positions in the league with a guy.
The second most important position in the league, in my opinion.
Right, and Andy Reid has a great quote years ago that I always trot out about every 2 or 3 years. He said, "Give me a quarterback, a left tackle, an edge rusher, 2 corners, and I'll figure out the rest." That's really what it comes down to in the NFL.
And that's what he does.
Right.
I mean, you look at the receivers that the Kansas City Chiefs have now, and they don't have anything remarkable. They got Travis Kelce, who's a beast, but their running back core is just okay. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, okay. Isaiah Pacheco's going to be good.
Average.
Juju, I mean, he's okay. I mean, Valdez-Scantling, okay, so what? But you got Patrick Mahomes, and I mean, you're solid at left tackle, and you have your edge rusher. So, I mean, he has all that stuff, and he's right.
Right. Those are the critical positions. And the problem right now is the Saints are missing Marshawn Lattimore. They're missing Trevor Penning, and they have no quarterback. So that's where this thing stands at the most important positions. They don't have the Jimmies and Joes there.
I don't disagree with that. Again, about 11, 12 minutes left in the show. If you want to give your prediction for Saints Steelers, we will show it on the air. But I want to spend 3 or 4 minutes talking about LSU and 3 or 4 minutes talking about the Pelicans, and we will wrap up the show with Saints Steelers. And it starts. We go straight to LSU. Hey, we talked about the bad news. Maybe we should have spent more time talking about LSU. That's the good news. They are ranked 7th. Who in their right mind, if you would have said after the Florida State game that at any point in the season, LSU would be ranked 7th? I mean, people would have told you were absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, that win, that was an epic game. I mean, epic. I was kicking myself for not being there to cover that game. I was on the fence, didn't go, but that was an all-timer. The decision to go for 2, an all-timer by Brian Kelly. He won't buy a drink or another meal in Baton Rouge for a while. That was just an unbelievable, dramatic win and confidence builder for LSU. And certainly now they're got in the driver's seat in the SEC West. And if they can win out here, they'll be playing Georgia probably in the SEC championship game. No one had that. LSU was picked 5th in the SEC West to start the season.
They were 28-1 to win the SEC.
Right.
I mean, 28-1. Joe asked, do we have a shot against Georgia? First of all, you got to get there. So hold your horses.
I don't like the shot against Georgia, but
my answer is let's don't put the cart ahead of the horse. But my answer would probably be no.
I think this game's very dangerous this week.
Oh, it's highly. This is, I like people that get upset when there's no such thing as a trap game. The hell there isn't. This is trap. Are you going to Fayetteville, Arkansas, where it's going to be about 22 degrees tomorrow morning?
Freezing.
And you're playing a team that just got kicked in the mouth by Liberty.
Yes.
That's going to be really ticked off. So we'll see if they have anything in them. and LSU's coming off the highest of all possible highs. It's not a good, but all that being said, I think LSU is going to win, and I think they're going to play well because I said it earlier in the week. I loved what Brian Kelly said about 45 seconds into his interview on ESPN. He started talking about Arkansas already.
Yep.
Like, we'll take a day to enjoy it, but Monday morning it's all about Arkansas. Arkansas doesn't give a damn that you beat Alabama, and no one else gives a damn that you beat Alabama on the football field. And so you can't sit there and feel great about yourself because it doesn't mean jack if you don't go beat Arkansas.
That's a great point, and I have an upcoming column that I'm going to write about this exact subject. And hear me out here. Look, I have lived in New Orleans now for 22 years, 23 years. I've lived most of my adult life in Louisiana, so I love it here. I love it. But let me just say this. One thing I've noticed about the people in Louisiana, it's one of my favorite things about the people here, is they're very emotional, very up and down, right? Passionate.
Oh, there's no question.
Passionate. What you don't want in your head coach is a passionate up and down guy. That was Ed
100%.
Ed Ogeron, I love him. Great guy, but very up and down. And as a result, his team was. You see when you have an even keel guy like a Sean Payton, like a Nick Saban, like a Brian Kelly, that's what you want in your head coach.
100%.
That's exactly what they've got in Brian Kelly. He's a manager. He's a CEO. And he's got this team, I think, their mental focus in the perfect spot. If they lose Saturday, it won't be because they overlooked Arkansas. They weren't ready. It'll just be because Arkansas is a good team, and it's hard to get up every week at this level and win games. That was the main reason I picked Georgia to beat Tennessee last week and to beat them that way. Tennessee they'd gone through a gauntlet. Every week was a big game, it seemed like, whereas Georgia hadn't had any big games. That was their lying in wait game. They've been waiting for that moment. It's hard to do. And so I feel like that could catch up to LSU a little bit this week, and they could lose, but it won't be because Brian Kelly had his head in the clouds.
Joe's asking how about Tulane. We're going to talk about Tulane in just a minute, I promise. They play tonight against Central Florida. Joe says that Georgia had a bad showing against Missouri. They look really good against Tennessee, up and down team. I don't think they're an up and down team. I think that Georgia is kind of like, remember Dunc, the LSU national championship season, Burrow and company, they didn't start off all that great. The first half of the season, they were just kind of ho-hum, and then it kind of turned on a dime. And it turned, I think, in part with the Alabama game. And when they beat Alabama, you could just tell they had that look. And Georgia kind of the same way last year, although Georgia was a little bit more dominant throughout the season. I don't think Georgia, the rest of this, I really think they're going to win the national championship again. I think they're clearly the best team in the country. I think Stetson Bennett is playing as – I mean, I love the way he's playing.
Drew Brees of college.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. He looked like – he even kind of physically looks like Drew Brees, right?
Just
I mean, but he has this
man.
air of shoulder. You talk about coaches that don't get too high or too low. Stetson Bennett's the same way. He carries himself like Drew Brees. I never would have thought I'd say this after last year in the national championship game and watching this little guy do his thing, but I think this guy could be a real pro.
I agree with you. I think he should definitely be considered for the Heisman Trophy. I mean, I know he doesn't have the measurables sometimes. That he's not the prototype NFL quarterback, but the guy's a winner, man, and he played great last week. I know it's probably going to come down to him and C.J. Stroud at this point, but Stetson Bennett is a big reason why I think they're going to win back-to-back national titles. I mean, that defense is legit. They knew exactly what they needed to do against Tennessee. Tennessee had no shot. I mean, they just destroyed their offensive line. I mean, it was ugly, and they were missing Nolan Smith in that game. So they're scary. I don't see anybody derailing them.
I don't either.
They've had a good schedule, too. They haven't been worn out. I think their best games are ahead of them.
I don't know that anyone matches up well with it. I'm trying to think of teams at the top. I mean, I think the team that probably would give them the best game is probably Ohio State, because I think C.J. Stroud is good enough to make something happen, and they have a good enough running game to get something going. But I don't think Ohio State can beat Georgia. No. I think they would give them a better game than anyone else, but I still think Georgia is head and shoulders above better than anyone else. Lindsay,
it's very similar, JD. Ohio State would have to be like the Clemson of a few years ago with Deshaun Watson, where one player carried a team. And C.J.
Correct.
Stroud has the ability to do it, but I agree with you. That's the only team I see.
Lindsay asked, do we think LSU will make it to the national championship to a bowl? Here's the deal. I mean, first of all, they'd have to collapse, like literally collapse, not to be playing a New Year's Day bowl. Oh, well, a January 2nd bowl, whatever. So that's where they are right now as far as that goes. I mean, they'd have to lose to Arkansas and Texas A&M for that to happen.
Yeah.
Secondly, I do think that if for some miracle of miracles, you can't compare Georgia to Alabama because Georgia's head and shoulders better than Alabama. I mean, it's a fact. But that being said, if they were to run the table and somehow miracle beat Georgia, I don't think there's any way they can be left out. And I know they're a 2-win team. They're gonna get in because Georgia's gonna get in, and you can't take Georgia and not take LSU in that position. So teams like Tennessee and TCU are rooting for LSU to lose, and Oregon. They're rooting for LSU to lose at some point because if LSU runs the table and wins the SEC championship, they're going to be in the playoff.
Right. I think what'll be interesting is if LSU runs the table and then loses to Georgia. I don't know if they get in above Tennessee. If Tennessee,
no, they won't. If they lose to Georgia, they're not in the playoff. But they'll. That's not what I mean. I mean, if they run the table and beat Georgia somehow, they can't leave them out.
Oh yeah, they're definitely in.
Yeah,
be in. They'll be an SEC champion in the Final Four.
Yeah, there's no way the SEC.
Georgia might still make it in.
No, Georgia would still make it in. I think too.
Yeah.
You
but
can't.
I mean, it'll be interesting to see if you got a bunch of unbeaten teams still left. That's why I keep saying it, and I'm so happy that they're going to.
TCU is going to lose to Texas this week anyway.
Yeah, they easily could. As a matter of fact, I think they will. But I feel like you get a 12-team playoff, it's going to be just about right. I wanted 16, but I think 12 would be great because then you can slip up like Alabama. Right. Let's face it, Alabama lost that game, but they easily could have won the game Saturday. Right. I mean, the guy drops the pass or something for LSU, and we're in a different world now. So, no one would want to play Alabama in a college football playoff. They just wouldn't. So
12 teams is acceptable. What we have now is not much better than what we had before. I mean, you're completely – and it's funny because we talked about the selection committee. The only reason why LSU was 10th going into last week, there's one reason. They wanted to make Alabama's resume and Tennessee's resume look better than it really was. And so they just figured Alabama would beat LSU. And if they didn't think Alabama was going to beat LSU, LSU wouldn't have been 10th. And now they were stuck. Now you're stuck with LSU. They don't want a two-loss team having a chance to get in there, especially from the SEC. There's already enough talk about how there's bias towards the SEC. So they were stuck now. And now LSU's 7th, and if they run the table and beat Georgia, they're going to be stuck again because they're going to have to put LSU in there. So they kind of screwed themselves, and I think it's hilarious. So a 12-team, it's a lot fewer chances to screw yourself. And,
well,
the selection committee doesn't matter as much.
My problem with college football has always been it's all based on perception. I mean, there's just everything's
money.
At what level are you on? All this crap like that. Play it on the field and decide. I mean, no one thought LSU would beat Alabama. No one thought they were on their level. And
That's
you know what? They played the game. We saw how it played.
I didn't.
I'm just saying. Everyone looks at Tulane and thinks they're not on the right level. Well, let's see them play somebody, and we'll see if they're on the level. Let these teams play on the field instead of like being a country club where we're the elites and you're not. That's a bunch of BS. I mean, we've seen that over the years, and to me, it's only going to hurt college football in the long run if they end up going to this 30-team super league, which is what's probably going to happen. I don't think it's going to be good. I think it's going to.
I agree.
I would much rather see them reduce scholarships, go down to 70, 75 scholarships, even out the talent level and make it more like a competitive college basketball version. You're never going to get there because football's an arms race, but let it be more competitive. I think that makes everything better about the sport. The NFL has proven the reason the NFL is such a dominant league and the reason people love it so much is because everyone has a chance. And we see it playing out this year. Who had the New York Giants and New York Jets as going to be good this year? Look at them.
I had the Giants. I didn't have the Giants.
You know what I'm saying? Everyone thought the Rams and Bucks were going to be great.
That's right. Yeah.
They're terrible.
Yeah.
You never know. Everyone's got a chance because there's revenue sharing and a rising tide.
That's what they want.
Boats.
That's what they want. And I agree. I mean, people want to see Appalachian State beat Michigan.
Right.
People, want to
Except
see
Michigan.
Except Michigan.
Michigan doesn't want it. That's the thing. Everybody's greedy. There's so much money involved, and there's nobody overseeing it. You're letting the inmates run the asylum, and they're all greedy, and everybody's got their hand in the cookie jar at the highest level, and they don't want you to join the country club. They don't want Appalachian State to be good. And I mean they being these elite programs, because if they did, they would be more willing to reduce scholarships. And you don't need 85 scholarships in college football.
It's not just that, though, Dunk. I think that they think if they went to that Super League kind of thing, that it would weaken the SEC schools a little bit. They're just sick. They're jealous. I mean, you talk about the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and the Big 12, and all. They're let's face it. They're sick of getting their ass kicked by the SEC. That's never going to change anytime soon. At least not anytime soon. I mean, it's just a fact. And it's because I think that you look at where the talent is in football in high school. And from Texas to the East Coast, you don't have to go north of Arkansas, and you just take that little quadrant, that little section of the country. And that talent is better by far than anywhere else in the country. And you can take Texas out of the mix if you want. I mean, I've been saying for years, the high school talent in Louisiana is as good as any state in the nation. And you see it year after year. You can watch it in the NFL. I mean, to me, who are two of the best receivers in the NFL? Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Not only were they on the same team, but one went to Rummel and one went to Destrehan. I mean, they two teams that didn't even throw the ball all that much in high school. They weren't even that, so you couldn't have known that they were going to be as good as they were. But that's the kind of talent that's down here.
No, there's no doubt. And that's irrelevant to me, though. It's more about the money and the TV.
Money.
TV's running the show.
Yeah.
And TV wants brands. They want to sell ads to high-profile programs. And so everyone is basically giving up college football for the greater good of ESPN and CBS. And it's me, maybe I'm being old school and naive here, but I'd like to see it be more of a collegiate model where you compete with each other.
I agree with you.
This is about programming is what's going on.
Oh, and that's one good thing. And people don't ever like to defend Roger Goodell. But Roger Goodell is one of the most brilliant, genius business minds you're ever going to see. And he knew how to turn the NFL. I mean, even take it from where it was. And I think that he realizes that it's way better if you have more parity in your league. And that's what he's done. I mean, you got your superstars, and that's great. But he does a really good job of making sure you don't have a Pittsburgh Pirates in the NFL. You don't have a Kansas City Royals in the NFL. It doesn't happen because he makes sure. I mean, the only reason why teams run themselves in the ground year after year, it's because they have bad leadership. It's not Goodell's fault. He tries to give them a chance. They just don't know how to run with it.
I just don't think in America we should be, and especially in collegiate sports, we should be in the business of putting, glass ceilings on programs and people. I think back, look, my formative years growing up in Louisville, I remember Florida State was an independent. Bobby Bowden took that job, and he built them into a national power. I mean, one of my first big jobs at the Times-Picayune was covering the national championship game where they beat Mike Vick and Virginia Tech in the Superdome. He built that program. At that time, Florida State was the best program in college football. And he built it because they went on the road, they played everybody, and they basically made themselves into a power the hard way by taking their lumps. They won a bunch of those games. I think they beat LSU and Baton Rouge, but they had to go on the road, and then they became accepted by the power elite.
That's right.
You can't do that now, Jim. It's impossible to build a program because the elite programs don't want to come any other people in the country club. They don't want another Florida State.
That's right.
They want it all for themselves, and I don't think that's how America should work. I mean, look at what Gonzaga has done in basketball. I know it's easier to do it in basketball, but they built a national power, and there's no restrictions in basketball like there is in football. There's these artificial restrictions and limitations in college football because of all the things that are built to make the elite schools even more elite.
Speaking of teams that you're talking about right now, and I don't have a banner for them, so we're just going to leave the LSU banner on, but the Tulane Green Wave fit in that model.
Yep.
I mean, who would want to play Tulane right now? I wouldn't.
No.
Which is why LSU doesn't play them anymore, which is kind of crappy, by the way. They should be playing every year, in my opinion. Georgia still plays Georgia Tech every year. LSU should be playing Tulane. But, Tulane playing UCF, this is kind of a interesting spot, but you keep thinking that Tulane's going to fall at some point, and then they don't. So other than USM, no one's really tripped them up. And, I think they find a way to win this game tonight and setting up a showdown with Cincinnati coming up.
Well, let me correct you real quick. It's tomorrow. It's 2:30.
Oh, okay. It's tomorrow. I don't know why I thought it was tonight.
Yeah. I think they got a game coming up on a Friday. But this game, yes, it's going to be at Ullman. It's going to be sold out.
That's right. Okay.
1,000 fans there.
It'll be cold too, isn't it?
National TV, yes. This is the first time in 70-something years that Tulane, as a top 25 team, has hosted a top 25 team. So
wow,
that just tells you how long. 1949 when they played LSU, back when they were in the SEC. So it's been a while, and I think it's safe.
That was even before we were born, Duncan.
I know. It's safe to say this is the biggest game in Ullman Stadium history. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And they tried to get College Game Day here. They almost came. They ended up going to, I think they're going to Austin for the TCU Texas game instead. But they were on the radar. And so regardless of what happens the rest of the way, I wrote my column today about this. What Willie Fritz has done to make the program relevant, to bring them to this unprecedented level. First time they've been this relevant nationally since 1998. Yeah. It's been remarkable. And he's done it by, there's been nothing shortcut. There's no magical formula, pixie dust. I mean, he's done it the hard way, brick by brick. He's got a really good staff, and they are very discerning and shrewd in their recruiting. They get guys that fit their system, these 3 stars that they can develop. And they know what they're doing out there on Willis Street. And I don't think this is going to drop off anytime soon. I think they're going to be good for a while now, the way they built this thing.
Real quick, does Tulane beat UCF?
Yes, I think the train's rolling right now. But I do agree with Michael Pratt. He thinks it's going to be a shootout. And I know Tulane's defense has been good, but I kind of tend to agree with him. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game.
Does LSU beat Arkansas?
Yes. I think they cover the spread in that game.
I agree.
I think it's dangerous, man. Dangerous.
It is dangerous. I don't know that I'm going to bet it, but I do like LSU. That's more of a live line thing. I think LSU has been one of those teams that's actually been fairly easy to bet on the live line because I think how they play early is how they're going to play late. So except for the Auburn game, which to me, even in an Auburn game, some fluky things happen, you could see that LSU was the better team. I made a little bit of money, waited for the right time, and got LSU, I think, at plus 320 or something like that. You could see that LSU –
basically like the stock market.
It is. I mean, and LSU is a good live team to bet. So I would wait to bet LSU and see how they come out. If they do come out flat, maybe stay off of it. But if they come out and start fast, it's okay if they're -3. It's okay if it goes to -5 or -6 if they look good. Because if they look good, they're going to blow the doors off of Arkansas, I think. We'll find that. All right, moving on. Before we go back to the Saints and give our predictions for that, I want to briefly touch on the Pelicans, who have had a weird run. They have had no favors done to them by the schedule makers, though, I will say. You go and play, you come off of this giant road trip. I mean, were they 6 out of 7 on the road or 7 out of 8 or something? The NBA did them no favors by you come off that road trip and then you got to come home and play the day after you play the Bulls in a physical, really tough matchup in which the Pels did a good job of coming back. So I think last night was kind of easy to predict that they wouldn't fare as well against the Blazers.
Man, you were weak. You're weak. You're so man.
I'm weak. I'm soft.
Well, the Trailblazers were on a back-to-back, and they also benched like 4 of their starters. They played.
But the problem is that when you saw that line that was only, I think the Pels were -5, that told me something there. They didn't. I mean, the Pels should have been about a 9 or 10 point favorite.
No Dame Lillard, no Keldon Johnson.
It's still. I mean,
there's no excuse.
I'm not giving them excuses to lose.
You're making excuses for
No.
I'm not. No excuse for that.
I'm thinking of it from a betting perspective. I really am.
From a betting perspective,
which is how my mind works. It's not. I'm not giving them any.
Yeah,
they're 6-6. They ought to be.
Got to get it together, man. I mean, they got to get it together. They need someone between Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson. It's got to be one of those 2 dudes has to step up and take this team by the throat. It's got to be one of those 2 young stars. And I don't know which one's going to be. I think it's probably going to be Zion. I don't think it's in BI's DNA to be that alpha, but it's going to have one of those two guys got to do it. CJ McCollum isn't that guy at this stage of his career. He's a great OG, as they say. He's a great guy for the locker room, but he's not the best player on the court. It's got to be one of these two young studs, and somebody's got to do it because they're too lackadaisical. Their mindset is too up and down. They have too many lapses. They just don't have enough dog in them, and they got to get that, or else it's going to be another 500 season.
A long homestand coming up, so they have to figure things out. At least they get a day off. They play the lowly Rockets, so I mean, you can't lose that one. You cannot lose to Houston at home. 2-10 Rockets. You got to find a way to win that one, and that sets up for a showdown. You get a couple days off before you got to play the Grizzlies, who I think are one of the best teams in the NBA.
Right, got to beat the Rockets, get right, and then have that big game against Memphis. I agree with you. Look, they can turn around. It's a long season, but there's no way to sugarcoat it. It's been a disappointing start.
All right, we have run long. Jim Derry and Jeff Duncan here on our Friday Dattitude session. We do it every Friday at 9:15. We did it at 9:45 this week, but that is a rare case. So every Friday from 9:15, usually till about 10:15, just kind of depends on. We got on kind of a heated discussion. Well, not Duncan and I, me and the listeners, I think got into a heated debate about the whole quarterback situation. I'll tell you something, Dunk. For the first time, maybe it probably has happened before, but I don't remember it happened. I got multiple emails this week about my podcast from Tuesday and going on basically saying the same thing I said here this morning. They were telling me how right I was. I'm not used to
shocking.
I'm not used to emails telling me I'm right. I'm used to hate mail. So I didn't even know how to respond. It took me probably 20 minutes of staring at the screen and like, is this guy serious or is he just trolling me? And then I realized they were serious. The emails that I got, they were all serious.
Well, you see how passionate people are, and right now in times like this, I found people just want to know what's going on, what's wrong, they want solutions. Why has it gone wrong? That's what people care about, and rightfully so, because this team's been good a long time, and they're not very good right now.
You're right, Joe. It is unbelievable. That's why I think maybe they were trolling me and they're just trying to make me feel. Maybe it was my wife from a different account, knowing that I've had a rough couple of weeks. Man, I don't know what it was, but whatever. I'll take it. And you're more than welcome to send me hate mail, love mail, whatever kind of mail you want to send me at jderry@theadvocate.com, on Twitter at Jim Derry Jr. Again, we do this every Friday. And at the end of every show on Friday, assuming the Saints play on Sunday, as they do this week, we will give our predictions. And it's that time of the show. Saints Steelers. Jeff Duncan, I think I know what you're going to say, but say it anyway.
Yeah, I got the Steelers winning this one. I think it's going to be a higher scoring game than what we're seeing on the betting line. But I think Kenny Pickett has his breakout game, unfortunately, and the Steelers win this one in a close contest down to the fourth quarter.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, I do agree with you. I think it's definitely over the 40. I don't get that 40 at all. I know these teams have not played all that well, but to be honest, they haven't played well because their defenses at times haven't played all that well. So I don't necessarily think the offenses lack anything. I agree that it's going to be an over 40 game for sure. I think the Saints win this game. They, like I said, they match up well. If you look at the numbers, I get that TJ Watt is coming back or most likely coming back. It's not definite, I don't think. But he's not going to just jump in there and be the TJ Watt of old. And like I said, it's all about matchups. You're going to see a lot of Kamara. I think the fact that you didn't see Taysom Hill last week means you're going to see a lot of Taysom Hill this week, which is a good thing. And I think that Andy Dalton actually will have a better game than it's hard to not have a better game than he had last week, but I think he's going to have a decent game. And then you'll have the geniuses coming out of their holes. They'll be crawling out of the holes. See, I told you how much better he is than Jameis Winston. It'll be.
Let it go. Let it go, JD.
I can't. You know me. I can't let things go. I'm trying. Chris says he thinks the Saints are going to win the division and make it to the NFC Championship. I want what you had for breakfast, Chris. Send some of it to me. Email me and tell me where you got it, and we'll all have one big old party. So I think the Saints win. I actually think they win by like 10. But again, I think it's going to be a higher scoring game. I'll say 30-20. How about that?
I like that. I'm with you on I think it's going to be a high-scoring game.
Are you going to Pittsburgh?
I am not. I'll be at Tulane tomorrow and watching from the Casa Duncan couch.
All right. Well, I'm going to. My wife is on a cruise. She won a cruise through work, so I'm stuck here at home working and being dad. Tomorrow night. Good thing LSU's playing in the morning because tomorrow night's the daddy-daughter dance. Can't miss that.
Nice.
So that's my weekend. And then actually, it's been a while since I think I've just been able to sit in front of a TV on Sunday and watch football. So that'll be fun. So we'll see how it goes. I will see you next Friday, my friend. Enjoy the Tulane game.
All right, bud. Talk to you then. And
we'll see all of you next week as well. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for all the comments. We appreciate them. Again, every Friday from 9:15 to 10:15 or so. There's no set end time. That's the good thing about these podcasts online. You can do it as long or as short as you want, and we do that. So, and then also catch Dattitude wherever you catch your podcast. I will add my monologue and my closing, and it'll probably be a lot like this. We'll see how it goes. See you next Friday, everybody. Peace and love, my friends.